I sat in my boss's office, staring at him in disbelief as he slid a termination letter across the desk with a smug smile. "Sorry," he said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It's just business." Business? My hands clenched into fists under the table as my mind raced. I had given this company everything, late nights, weekends, bending over backward to fix his mistakes, and now, just like that, I was being discarded? My pulse pounded as I scanned the letter, looking for some kind of reason, some justification, but there was none. No explanation, no performance issues, nothing. "This doesn't make sense," I said, my voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside me. But my boss just leaned back in his chair, grinning like he'd already won. "Life's not fair," he shrugged. "You'll land on your feet, or not." Then he laughed, actually laughed, like this was just another power trip for him, another life he could ruin without consequences. I walked out of that office with my blood boiling, my mind a swirling storm of rage and humiliation. He thought he was untouchable, that he could do whatever he wanted and no one would fight back, but he was wrong, dead wrong, because I wasn't just going to walk away. No, I was going to dig. I was going to find out exactly who he really was, and when I did, I was going to burn his entire world to the ground. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't letting this go. My boss thought he could just fire me with no explanation and move on like I never existed. Not a chance. I pulled out my laptop, heart pounding as I typed his name into every search bar I could think of. LinkedIn, Facebook, old company records. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for yet, but I knew one thing. No one is truly clean. At first, all I found was the usual corporate fluff. A spotless online presence, full of polished business jargon and charity events. But something felt off. The way he had fired me so casually, with that smirk, that certainty that I wouldn't fight back. It wasn't normal. I clicked deeper, sifting through old job listings, press releases, and anything that could hint at a pattern. And then I saw it. A deleted news article. My stomach tightened. Why would a news article about him be erased? I searched harder, finding an archived version buried deep in the web. My heart pounded as I read the headline, "CEO abruptly resigns amid allegations of financial misconduct." My breath caught in my throat. Financial misconduct? Resigned? No, he hadn't resigned. He had run. I read through the article, my pulse hammering. He had been accused of embezzling millions from his previous company, covering up shady deals under layers of fake expenses and ghost employees. But somehow he had slipped away without charges. He walked away scot-free and popped up at my company just a year later. No wonder he had no problem firing people on a whim. He never stayed long enough to face the consequences. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was this really enough? Maybe he had changed. Maybe he was just ruthless in business but not actually a criminal. But then I saw the real twist. One name kept popping up in the records, a shell company tied to his personal bank account. The same company my employer had mysteriously funneled large payments to in the last few months. He was doing it again. A chill ran down my spine as the pieces clicked together. He wasn't just a corporate shark. He was a repeat fraudster. And this time, he wasn't just bleeding money out of the company, he was setting someone up to take the fall. My gut twisted as I scanned the most recent transactions. The account in question was linked to an employee's name. And then I saw my name. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just fired me. He had framed me. Whatever financial mess he was hiding, he had tied my name to it before throwing me out. If anyone investigated, I'd be the one on the hook. He had planned this from the start, used me as a pawn. My head spun, nausea rising in my throat. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. My breath came in short, uneven gasps as I stared at the screen, reading my own name over and over again. My boss hadn't just fired me. He had set me up. The sheer calculated cruelty of it made my skin crawl. Suddenly, the way he had smirked during my termination, the way he had shrugged off my confusion, it all made sense. He wasn't just getting rid of me, he was erasing me. I thought back to the past few weeks, replaying conversations I had brushed off as nothing, the odd assignments he gave me, the random documents he had me sign telling me they were just protocol, the way he had insisted on handling all financial approvals himself. I had thought it was just micromanagement, but now I saw it for what it really was, a setup. I remembered a moment just last week when I had asked a simple question about a strange charge on an expense report. His reaction had been instant, his smile had tightened, his tone had gone sharp. "Don't worry about that, just do your job." I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now I realized I had unknowingly stumbled onto something he didn't want me to see. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. He had been planning this for months, setting up the paper trail, making sure my name was attached to just enough transactions to make it look like I was the one stealing. And once the groundwork was laid, he did the final step. He fired me, cut me off before I had a chance to connect the dots. I rubbed my temples, my mind spinning. How had I not seen this coming? Had I really been that blind? No, that wasn't it. I had trusted the system. Trusted that if I did my job, if I worked hard, if I followed the rules, I would be safe. But he had never played by the rules. The betrayal burned, but underneath it something else was brewing. Rage. Not the wild, explosive kind, but a slow, simmering fire. He thought he had won. He thought I would walk away quietly, that I would panic and disappear while he walked away clean. But he had underestimated me. I exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of my desk. If he wanted me to disappear, I would, but not in the way he expected. I wouldn't fight him, not yet. I wouldn't storm into his office demanding answers, wouldn't go straight to the authorities. That's what he wanted, that's what he was prepared for. No, I would play along. I would let him think I was defeated, let him think I was too scared, too broken to fight back. I would move carefully, digging deeper into his mess, and when I had everything I needed, when there was no way for him to squirm out of it, I would destroy him. I clicked off my laptop, my pulse finally steady. This wasn't over, not even close. If my boss thought he was untouchable, that he could ruin lives without consequences, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next day, I walked into my former office building, acting like nothing had happened. Like I was just another ex-employee picking up my final paycheck in loose ends. My boss sat in his glass-walled office, laughing with someone over the phone, completely unaware that I knew the truth. I clenched my fists, keeping my expression neutral. Not yet. I had to be careful. When he saw me, his eyebrows flicked up in mock surprise, like he hadn't expected me to return, like he had already erased me. "Oh," he said casually, setting his phone down. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." His smugness made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to smile. "Just tying up loose ends." He leaned back in his chair, studying me for any sign of weakness, of panic. I gave him nothing. "That's good," he said, nodding. "I was worried you might have taken things personally." He was baiting me, testing the waters, but I knew better than to take the hook. I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "Oh no, I totally get it. Business is business, right?" His smirk deepened, the confidence in his eyes returning. He actually believed I had accepted my fate. "Exactly," he said smoothly. "Smart girl." The way he said it made my stomach twist. Smart girl. As if I had finally learned my place. As if he had expected me to kick and scream, but now that I was being reasonable, he could pat me on the head and move on. Disgusting. Then, casually, he reached for a folder on his desk and slid it toward me. "By the way," he added, "I had HR finalize everything. Just a few documents to sign and we can part ways cleanly." Cleanly. The words sent a chill down my spine. This was it, the trap. I picked up the folder, flipping through the papers, my pulse hammering. Buried in the legal jargon was exactly what I expected, a non-disclosure agreement, a silence contract. If I signed this, I'd be legally bound to never speak about anything that happened in this company, including whatever financial mess he'd tied my name to. For a split second, I hesitated. If I signed, I'd get a severance check, money I actually needed. But if I signed, I'd also be letting him win, letting him walk away, free to do this to someone else. I met his eyes and slid the folder back across the desk. No. His smile faltered. Excuse me? I'm not signing, I said, my voice steady, the first crack in his control. His fingers twitched against the desk, his jaw tightening. Then came the first tactic, guilt. Come on, he sighed, rubbing his temple like I was exhausting him. You've already lost your job. Do you really want to make this harder on yourself? But I wasn't the same person he fired. I wasn't afraid anymore. I tilted my head, offering him a polite, unreadable smile. I think I'll take my chances. For the first time, he actually looked nervous. And that's when I knew. He realized he wasn't in control anymore. His fingers drummed against the desk, his smirk slipping into something colder. You're making a mistake, he said, voice low, controlled. Just sign it and we can both move on. The way he spoke, as if this was a favor to me, as if I was just being difficult, made my blood boil. I didn't flinch. Oh, I think I'll move on just fine. His nostrils flared, and just like that, the act cracked. All right, he sighed, leaning forward. Clearly, you're upset and I get that, but I've been more than generous. You should be thanking me for even offering severance after the mess you made, gaslighting. I expected that. I let out a sharp laugh. The mess I made? I tapped the desk. You mean the fake transactions you attached to my name? The ones that lead straight back to your personal accounts? His eyes widened. Just for a second, a flicker of panic. But then, just as quickly, he recovered. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. Denial. Another expected move, but now I had him exactly where I wanted him. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, scrolling for a moment before holding it up. Then explain why I have every single wire transfer linked between your shell company and my supposed fraudulent transactions. His face drained of color. The office suddenly felt too quiet, the weight of my words hanging between us. This was real. This was undeniable. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, his mind scrambling for an escape. Where did you get that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Oh, so now you're concerned about privacy, I mocked, tilting my head. Not so fun when someone else digs through your records, huh? His hands curled into fists, his jaw tightening. I had never seen him look this cornered before. He tried one last move, playing the victim. He exhaled, shaking his head. Look, this is a misunderstanding. I was under pressure. I had no choice. He gestured vaguely, as if I would somehow understand. It's complicated. Not really, I said flatly. You got caught. His face twisted with rage, and he slammed his hand against the desk. You don't understand what you're getting into, he hissed, his voice sharp with desperation. You could ruin everything, not just for me, for the company, for people who rely on their jobs. Do you really want that on your conscience? I leaned forward, dropping my voice to a whisper. That's funny. You fired me without a second thought. Did you lose sleep over it? His lips parted, but nothing came out. Silence. Checkmate. I stood up, smoothing my hands over my bag. I wonder what corporate is going to think when they see this. I waved my phone in the air before tucking it away. Or the press. His eyes went wild with panic, true panic this time. I had taken everything from him in one move. He opened his mouth again, probably to beg, but I didn't care to hear it. I was already walking away, and just before I reached the door, I turned back one last time. "You thought you were untouchable," I smiled. "Turns out you were just sloppy." He didn't say a word, because for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to say. I had barely made it to the elevator when I heard his footsteps rushing after me. "Wait," he called out, his voice strained, almost desperate. I didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the panic that was now dripping from his tone. The powerful, untouchable boss I had once feared, gone, replaced by a man watching his empire collapse in real time. He reached out as if to grab my arm, but I stepped inside the elevator before he could touch me. The doors started to close, but he shoved his hand between them, forcing them open. "Just listen," he begged, his chest rising and falling like he had just run out of time. "We can work something out." I raised an eyebrow. "Work something out?" I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. "You mean like how you worked out throwing me under the bus for your crimes? Or like how you worked out firing me without cause?" His jaw tightened. He had nothing. No excuse, no lie, just pure, pathetic. "You don't understand," he said, his voice lowering, trying to sound sincere. "I didn't have a choice. If this gets out, I lose everything. We both lose." Ah, there it was, the final manipulation attempt, making me feel like I had something to lose too. For a second, I just watched him, watched the way his eyes flicked between me and my phone, the way he was calculating whether he still had control. I could almost see the gears turning in his head, scrambling for one last trick, and I let him think I was considering it. Then I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "That's where you're wrong," I said softly. "You're the only one who has anything left to lose." His face dropped. He knew it was over. I reached for the elevator button again. This time, he didn't stop me. He just stood there, his breathing heavy, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. For the first time, he had no control, no plan, no power. As the doors slid shut, I looked him in the eye one last time. "Enjoy your downfall." And then the doors closed, trapping him in the mess he created. I stepped out of the office building for the last time, inhaling deeply as the crisp air hit my face. It was over. The weight I had been carrying, the betrayal, the fear, the anger, it all drifted away, leaving behind a strange, surreal lightness. I had won. And yet part of me still couldn't believe it. I had spent so long trapped under his control, convinced that playing by the rules would protect me. But now I knew the truth. Men like him didn't follow rules. They used them as weapons, shields, distractions. And for the first time, I had beaten him at his own game, not by playing fair, but by playing smarter. As I walked toward my car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I already knew who it was. I pulled it out, staring at the screen, watching his name flash one last time, one final, desperate attempt, maybe to negotiate, maybe to beg, maybe to threaten. It didn't matter anymore. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then, with a slow exhale, I hit block. No second thoughts, no hesitation, just silence. Because that's all he deserved. The following week, the news broke. Fraud, money laundering, a full-scale investigation. I read the headlines with a cup of coffee in hand, scrolling through the scandal that had finally caught up to him. They were tearing him apart, his investors, the media, his own employees. The man who thought he was untouchable was being dragged through the mud for everyone to see. I expected to feel triumphant, but what I really felt was peace. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about finally being free. Free from the doubt, the manipulation, the feeling that I had to prove myself to a man who was never worth it. As I closed the news tab, my reflection stared back at me from the screen. I looked different. Not broken, not defeated, just me. A version of myself I had almost forgotten existed. I picked up my phone, this time to call someone who actually mattered, because life was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to live it. Comment below what you would have done.